Welcome. I'm Matthew Phelps, co-author of the Turning to God's Word Bible study, In the Beginning, the Book of Genesis. Today we'll be talking about Lesson 26 of our study, which covers the Book of Genesis, chapters 44 and 45. Here we see the conclusion that we have been building up to with this exchange between Joseph and his brothers as they have been interacting with him in Egypt. We've gone back and forth for a while, as have his brothers, and we've kind of been building up to this trip with Benjamin that we're now in the middle of, with the tension around what's going to happen. And what happens is we come to see Joseph's plan, which is to sabotage or ambush Benjamin here through nefarious means, with what seems to be the objective of taking Benjamin away from his brothers as things start to play out. It sure looks like that's what he was going for. But then something unexpected happened that changes his mind. And that is his brothers behave differently at the prospect of losing Benjamin. One of his brothers, Judah, behaves very differently at the prospect of losing Benjamin than he appeared to be behaving at the prospect of losing Joseph. Though we know there was some sentiment towards saving Joseph before that Joseph didn't know because it never came to pass. Whole thing, but from Joseph's perspective, they were all kind of complicit and on board. And so someone standing up and saying, nope, this isn't okay, and, take me instead, is enough to move Joseph to the point that it looks like he changes his mind in terms of what he was going to do and decides instead to reveal himself to his brothers. There's the whole big reveal, and everybody is reunited again. It is an interesting thing. It shows us more about Joseph and what he has in mind. It shows us something about at least one of his brothers and kind of lays the foundation for a reunion in Egypt rather than in Canaan. The interesting, I think probably most interesting point theologically here is that Joseph chooses not to blame his brothers for what happened in the past because he says it was God's will and it was necessary. And God did that to him, not his brothers, and he and God are fine, so he can't hold it against his brothers. There is a brief moment of tension when he reveals himself to his brothers before he reveals himself positively and that he feels okay to them, where they're quiet and probably very scared because he has an immense amount of power and they understand that they have badly wronged him. But that perspective is no longer his, right? He's doing well for himself. He's happy with his life. He's still in a very close relationship with God, and he has understood the things that happened to him as being determined by God and for the better. And in so doing, it no longer harbors any ill will, although he wasn't necessarily planning to grow closer to his brothers until Judah spoke up. So maybe he still has some more conflicted feelings than he's necessarily letting on as well. But he's generally comfortable with the idea of reunion and not having any kind of revenge or anything. That's a big thing to be able to do, right? Like, to be able to recognize where God has acted in our lives and where bad things have happened or even other people have contributed to those bad things happening. If that comes to a good place for us and for the people close to us to be able to just kind of move on. And it's not necessarily forgiving because it becomes not relevant to the other people at all, right? If you say this is where God has acted and it's good, then I don't get to hold a grudge against the other people involved because I'm acknowledging God's will in what happened. But that can be a hard thing to do, right? To say, I see now God acting here, so I'm okay with all of this. That is not always a simple thing. And it takes a lot of maturity in a relationship with God, I think. So from my point of view, that's like the big takeaway from this lesson is people can behave badly toward us. It can work toward God's plan. And when we have recognized and acknowledged what's come of that, maybe we don't get to hold a grudge anymore. And maybe it's all of a sudden because if you hold something against anybody there, it has to be against God, right? If you're saying this was God working and you're still upset about what happened, who are you upset with? Yes, bad people behaved badly. Newsflash, that happens. But God allowed it and it was okay. If I'm not mad about God or mad at God about it, can I be mad at the other people? An interesting question, right? Like, having very recently gone through a thing that I think is an example of this that was quite stressful and pretty unpleasant and is resolving, I think, in a probably very good way. It's interesting to think, okay, I do think God was acting behind all of that. There are people who behaved very unpleasantly along the way, and maybe I don't get to harbor any lingering resentment or ill will. Maybe all things are working for the good, and if they are, I don't need to hold any grudges. But interesting position to try to get to. And I think relevant food for thought is if we're really in line with and acting in accordance with God's will and trying to do that in everything we do in our lives, and we believe that God is guiding and directing that course of our lives, do we get to hold against other people how they treat us, or is it just, I'm on this path with God and I'm just going to focus on that, and whatever happens and God and I will deal with it and not worry about holding grudges or harboring ill will or any of these things that can weigh us down. Which isn't to say let people walk all over you again either, right? Like, that's Joseph's thing here, right? He may have moved on from harboring really bad feelings toward his brothers, but his initial thought is also, I don't want these guys in my life, so I'm not going to tell them who I am, and we can be okay, but we'll be okay from a distance, and with them still thinking I'm dead. And in that context, all can be good. But then he decides, okay, no, I think God is pulling this back together, and that can be okay as well. But for Joseph, it's all about where God is leading things and what God is doing. And he is not focused on these other people, even his brothers. And he's definitely not stuck in the past, right? If he were, he'd be behaving very differently here. So we can be focused on God. We can not harbor ill will against people, but that doesn't mean you let them walk all over you and give them lots of opportunities to continue to be bad to you either, right? Like, Joseph is walking that line very well here, and kind of feeling out the situation and looking for what God wants in his life. So plenty of interesting food for reflection here. that ultimately boils down to, if we believe we're on a path that God is leading us down, the actions of other people are almost irrelevant, at least from a point of view of how I end up feeling toward those people. Because it's God who's in the driver's seat, and my issues and the things that I need to work out are with God. And if I can do that, then everybody else is kind of whatever. And Joseph demonstrates that excellently. Here we see the plot we're kind of building to the apex of tension here in this story. And Joseph has a plot. He is sending the brothers away with the food they came for after they all shared this meal, and wishing them well. He gives them big quantities of food, as much as they can carry. He doesn't take their money back from before, but he instructs his servant to take his silver cup and to hide it in specifically Benjamin's stuff. And then he instructs his servants, after they've left, to run after them and accuse them of having stolen that cup, and of having wronged Joseph. This is funny because, of course, they have wronged Joseph, but they have not wronged Joseph in this particular way. It is not an unjust thing to do, even if it's, or let's just say it's deserved. But as we'll see, Joseph's intention is not to punish his brothers here, right? He had way better means of doing that he did not avail himself of. He has a specific plan, and it involves specifically Benjamin, as we'll see. So as the servant catches up to them, we really see evidence that there's a plot here, and we see it in a disconnect. So the servant catches them. He says more or less what he was instructed. You all dirty thieves, how could you? And they, of course, we didn't do anything wrong. And then the brothers say, we're so sure we didn't do anything wrong. Like, if you find anybody who has the cup, let that one be killed, and all the rest of us will be servants. And here this is where we see the evidence that this is premeditated, right? The servant then says, oh yeah, it'll be exactly like you say. It'll be, we'll take as a slave the one who has the cup, and all the rest of you can go. Like there's an agreement between those two things when they're radically different things. What is the aim here? Benjamin is the one, unbeknownst to him, who has the cup. We're not looking to kill anybody. We are looking to get rid of all of the other brothers and not treat it like it has anything to do with them, and to keep Benjamin in Joseph's custody. Joseph is trying to snatch Benjamin. You could argue that that's not true, but it sure looks like he insisted, I'm not giving you more food till Benjamin's here. Benjamin shows up. He does this thing wherein he contrives to keep Benjamin and send all of the other brothers back home without knowing that Joseph is Joseph. And presumably at that point he would reveal to Benjamin that he is his brother. We don't get that far to know. But it seems like this seems very premeditated, and like Joseph intends to take his full brother and live with him in Egypt. And it's kind of a clever plan at that. When the brothers get back into Joseph's presence, relevantly and interestingly, Judah is the spokesperson for the brothers here, though he is not the oldest. He is the one who had assured Jacob and guaranteed that Benjamin was coming back. So he probably does not feel very good about his current situation with how things are unfolding. What's really interesting, he does not argue Benjamin's innocence at all. He doesn't say, I know my brother, he'd never do this. This can't be a thing that happened. There must be some mistake or misunderstanding. He just says, take me in his place. It's an interesting perspective. I feel like I would be trying to say, it couldn't possibly have been like that, and trying to argue it, but that's not the approach he takes. He just says, okay, there's guilt. How can I argue with you? And Joseph even says, do you not know that such a man as I can indeed divine? And there's irony in that situation, right? Like, they think he has this divining cup, and that's the big deal, and he uses this cup, and he's like some kind of person serving Egyptian gods and doing divination. But really, he's the guy who had the dream of all of his brothers bowing down to him, and he can divine, but he doesn't use a stupid silver cup to do it. It's because of his relationship with God. But the version he's presenting is not real, but the statement is still very much true, and his previous prophecies are actively coming to fulfillment right now. So that is an incredibly ironic and a kind of a funny statement, but also true. And here we see now they're arguing over what's going to happen. Joseph is like, or Judah is like, take me instead, and I'll be your servant. And Joseph is saying, I couldn't possibly. That wouldn't be fair to you, right? Or for me to punish all of you other brothers for the mistakes of this one. I'll only keep Benjamin. Isn't that so generous of me? When that's the only thing he wants to do, right? And again, there's the mismatch of motives here and arguing over things. And, if you're not living in it and you're not one of these brothers, it's actually very funny how misaligned it is and how they're talking past one another and how Joseph is trying to maneuver it to get Benjamin in his custody. But I'm certain that Judah does not see it that way, which probably adds to how funny it is, honestly. This is Judah recapping the situation, right? Which Joseph would not, as the servant of Pharaoh, known all of the details of, right? Although actually knowing that family dynamic, again, he probably knows a lot more about how that went than Judah thinks he does. Again, the layers of irony here are thick, but to help build that, Judah is explaining to Joseph as though he has no idea about any of this, how it went down when they all went home, and Joseph wanted to see and demanded that they bring the younger brother, and they couldn't, and Dad wouldn't let him part, and Pharaoh's servant, you have no way of knowing this, but we lost another brother, and he only had 2 children from his beloved wife, and one of them we lost already, and so we can't possibly lose this one. Not that you, Pharaoh's servant, would have any way of knowing anything about that, and it would kill our poor dad if we came back without Benjamin. So, as much as you think, Joseph, Pharaoh's servant, that you're being kind and generous to us by only wanting to take this one brother, that is a thing that doesn't work for us because of circumstances around having lost our other brother and what it did to our dad. And trying to explain that family situation to Joseph as a reason for not letting Joseph take Benjamin is, again, like, it's funny. It's just funny. And the recap helps. But again, Judah is very distressed, right? And he's explaining this to try to shed some light on why he would rather be in Benjamin's place, because he can't do that to his dad. It's very heartfelt from his point of view as well. So, interesting development. The other thing that's worth noting, because his father going to his grave, part of this, he says, go down to Sheol. That's not hell, right? Like, so we're in the Old Testament. There is a heaven. Nobody goes there. There are good people and there are bad people. There are no good enough people. So there is still, the way that it is viewed, there is what we would call hell, but it is not how we think of hell, right? It is where the dead people go. But Jesus even tells a parable that conveys some of this, right? The idea of Lazarus the rich man, right? Like, slave is badly treated, goes down to Sheol, and is in a relatively cozy place, and the bosom of Abraham, where Abraham is, because not in heaven, right? And then rich man dies, goes down, sees him, says, take care of me. It's like, nope, you had your chance, and you blew it when you were alive, and here you are, right? So the implication is there is a better and a worse place to be when you're dead. So it doesn't mean that you're going to hell, but it does mean you're not going to heaven, right? And it's not purgatory. The better place is not purgatory, right? Because that is still a subset of heaven and is a different thing than this. And now that hell has been harrowed, there aren't people in a good place, right? Jesus died, went down, took everybody who didn't deserve what we currently think of hell, and brought them up to heaven. So now if you're down there, there's not a good version of being in hell now. You're not trying to go to the bosom of Abraham right now, because Abraham's not there anymore. And the people who aren't the ones you want to be in company with. So while there is a view that that's how that worked then, that is not a thing to look at as a situation that you want to be involved with now. But there was only the one place that dead people could go before Jesus. So it was just different situation than we have now. Jesus changed everything. But just think of it as dying. And don't worry too much about the specifics of it. I don't think we're meant to. But in case that's throwing anybody, that's kind of the quick rundown. Judah ends his recap and summary with the proposition of that's why Judah needs to stay instead of Benjamin. Not because Benjamin, that dirty, rotten crook, didn't do anything wrong or deserves it or anything like that, but just because think about our poor father, and I guaranteed him that Benjamin would return, and could you please, Pharaoh's servant, that I don't know is Joseph yet, could you please just take it out on me instead of on him, for the sake of my father. And that's his case. And that's the first thing in all of this that's the thing that Joseph didn't expect to happen, right? He has been manipulating this situation and everything has been going exactly the way he expected it to happen until right now. And now a thing happens that he did not expect. And that changes the course of what he has in mind. And so, a thing having happened that Joseph didn't expect, he has a reaction that he wasn't planning on as well. Uh, this is not how his brothers behaved around his involuntary deportation. Um, and his not expecting this to happen is based on his experience with his brothers and what he knows of what went down then. But what he's seeing is his assessment of who his brothers are is not entirely accurate to who they actually are now, which is good news, and makes him reassess, which he does quickly and on the spot, because again, he is a very bright guy, and seeing that the factors that he planned for weren't what he weren't accurate, he reevaluates his plan. He is also overwhelmed by, that's got to be a big relief, honestly, and overwhelmed by the idea of all of that, right? Emotional thing, he has an emotional response, but he also rationally processes that, okay, change of plan, because one of my assumptions here was wrong. And he decides to tell his brothers that he is Joseph. The brother's response is not a positive, overwhelming, good emotional response. It is, they are dismayed at his presence. They understand that they have done him wrong and that they're in a very precarious spot. Like, he hasn't shown them much ill will, and they might, if they think about it, be able to understand everything that's currently happening with Benjamin, knowing that this is Joseph, right? Like, everything else he's done for them has been good and generous, except this one thing, and they can probably, if they take a step back, they can probably process exactly what he's doing here as well, and the fact that he's bailing on it because he told them. Like, they could get to a place of being comfortable, but they'd have a lot they'd have to work through instantly to do that. Joseph has had time to process that his brothers are around. Even if he hasn't told them that he's Joseph, he's had time to get used to it. They have not. From their point of view, the last time they saw their brother Joseph, they were selling him into slavery. And now here he is with an immense amount of power in a place where they have almost none. And he's letting them know who he is. And they are dismayed is a probably a soft word for how they're feeling. But he also didn't kill them earlier, so maybe they're just not comfortable. And certainly don't know what to make of the situation, which is honestly very deserved. So here we are. The cat is out of the bag, and now we have to figure out what to do about it. Now we see what Joseph thinks about all of this. He's decided to make himself known to his brothers, presumably with an aim towards some sort of reconciliation, because if he was going to do it with an aim toward revenge, he'd have done it right away. And we see his very mature perspective on this. That brothers you don't have to be distressed or upset with yourselves because of what happened. It's in the past, and it's what God wanted. And it's worked out well. And God wanted it specifically to bring good for our people. As you know, we're in a famine. What you don't know is it's only starting. We're in year 2, and it's going to run for 7 years. So there's a lot more hardship to come. and God wanted to make sure that we were all taken care of in this. And so he sent me here to Egypt to have this relationship with Pharaoh, one that he describes as even him being like a father to Pharaoh. Interesting that it's like a father to Pharaoh and not like a son to Pharaoh. But he has served in a capacity of being a wise advisor. And so, yeah, high level of authority in Egypt, as we know. Joseph's point is that is all not for the Egyptians, although he saves a lot of Egyptian lives too. That is all done for the sake of Jacob and his sons and all of their retinue. And so, can Joseph hold any of that against his brothers? He says no. God did all of this, and this is good. And it was for a good reason, and good things have happened. So, brothers, don't worry yourselves about this. You just did what God wanted, even if that's not what you were trying to do. Now, the point of all of this happens. Joseph asked his brothers to bring their father and everyone else to Egypt. Go tell Dad that I'm alive and get everybody here because the famine's going to keep going and I can take care of you here in a way that I can't there. So here I am. I'm Joseph. Get everybody here to Egypt, which is the thing that God wanted to do, right? The plan was to get everybody to Egypt. Now we're doing the plan. The fascinating part is that even as Joseph thought he understood and was executing the plan, he didn't have any idea, right? He didn't know that the plan was to get his family to Egypt until right now. And right now he's doing it. He has been serving this plan this whole time without knowing what it is. The neat part is that he recognizes it when it happens, right? And all of a sudden he says, oh, that's the plan. Okay, let's go. I'm in, I'll do that. Let's go. But he's been working toward and serving this plan all this time with no idea. But he's just faithfully doing what God's telling him to do. And then he gets to the point of payoff of, oh, that's neat. Great. Yes, please, let's do that. And there he is. That's a fair example of how it can work to try to follow and to serve God, where you do the best you can at any given moment in time without knowing the bigger picture. And then sometimes, if we're lucky, we get to a point where everything clicks and we start to see a lot more of that bigger picture come into play. And it's, oh, that was worth it. I would have done that in order to get this. Absolutely. Yes, that was worth it, even though it didn't seem like it. Good. And we see Joseph process that in real time and get on board very quickly, and welcome his brothers and encourage bringing their father. When Pharaoh learns that Joseph's long-lost brothers have showed up, Pharaoh is overjoyed because, of course, Pharaoh really likes Joseph. I mean, more than happy to say, more of these. Yeah, bring him here. Like, we want that. And we'll take very good care of them because we like Joseph and more seems better. So bring him here. We'll give him the best of this. We'll send stuff to help bring them here. They can, some wagons. They can have the best land in Egypt. And don't worry about your stuff. You can leave all of that behind because you'll have better stuff when you get here. Just get here and we'll take care of all of the rest, and it'll be great. So Pharaoh, right now, very much on board with having Israelites in Egypt and treating them very well. Pharaoh in the future, different Pharaoh, less so. But that's not where we're at now. This starts very positively and ends, spoiler alert, if you read Exodus, not as amicably. So at last, the brothers get home and to let Dad know that Joseph is actually alive and that he's in Egypt and that he wants Jacob to come to Egypt. We gloss over in this that puts them in a very weird spot, having to tell that to their dad. Hey Dad, you know the brother that we told you was mauled by wild animals, he's in Egypt, and he got there when we sold him into slavery to Egypt, and then told you that he was mauled by wild animals. But it's okay now because he's in charge of Egypt and he wants us to go there with him and he's not mad at us. So, and he's very rich. So we should go to Egypt now. Like, the go to Egypt part now, great. But we don't see the part of that conversation where surely Jacob has follow-up questions that are surely not comfortable for those brothers. Again, like, that would be hilarious, right? Like, we miss that here. The musical takes some liberties, and even that doesn't go into this. But that's the part that I want to see, is what does that conversation look like? Because they would have a lot of explaining to do. And Jacob's not going to be probably any too happy about any of that. But, ultimately he says, I'll take it. My son is alive. Net good. Whatever about these other guys. But yeah, great. I want to go and see my son Joseph, and I get to do that before I die. Let's go to Egypt. This has been an overview of Lesson 26 of the Turning to God's Word Bible study, In the Beginning, the Book of Genesis. For more information, consult our written study and visit us online at turningtogodsword.com.